All right, good morning, everybody. For the few of us that are here, I got to start off with this. What did you guys talk about last week in Bible class, if you were here? Because I know some of you weren't here. And Dennis doesn't get to answer. Well, he can. He can answer. Where'd you go? I know you left Acts, right?
We left you right where you stopped.
Okay.
We talked about Jesus getting ready to come here, Luke chapter 1 and 2.
Right on. Talked about angels and Mary a bit too, I would imagine. That's some really cool scripture when you read it, and we make the joke about angels all the time. Even when the angel Gabriel came to Mary, he said, "Do not be afraid," and that's the token angel line. And we think angels are all fluffy and white and magical, but we also have pictures drawn of angels with multiple eyes and wings and arms, and so like I could see why they'd say, "Don't be afraid," because obviously they're not of this world, no matter how they appear one to you. But I always think that's interesting. Anything huge pop out to you guys in Luke chapter 1 and 2? I mean, we'll go back to Acts here in a minute, but it's just kind of some good scripture right there.
It's both books I told the class that it's just like having Luke part 1 and Luke part 2. Luke and Acts are same author, and they have about the very same introduction on both of them. And I think it's like a movie and a sequel, or
Sure.
it's a two-part thing. One is about Christ, one's about his church. I mean, that's oversimplifying, of course.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they work right together, right? It's Christ on the front end and the back end, kind of. Christ part 2 is Christianity. All right, well, we are going to be in chapter 23 of Acts. And so 2 weeks ago, we talked chapter 22 through pretty well. And just thinking about some of the things I was going to reshare from chapter 22, we have Paul arrested in the temple, Paul speaking to the people in the temple in chapter 21. And then as we start chapter 22, he is giving his witness, kind of giving his testimony, sharing the story of his conversion, the story of how God spoke to him on the road to Damascus. And as seems to happen a lot with Saul/Paul, people get angered about that. Riots happen. It's going down. And so basically it's captured and is going to be beaten until they can get information out of him. Likely maybe even to death. And where we really start to see Paul kind of shine here is in the end of chapter 22, where we talked about it a lot. The people were shouting and throwing their cloaks, yelling for him to be examined by flogging. And then verse 25, they had him stretched out and they were about to whip him. And then he says, "Is it lawful for you to flog a man who's a Roman citizen?" And I said, I just can't imagine how he said that. Was he a little snarky about that? Was he just kind of, nice and calm, like they're about to beat him likely to death? And he said, a question, is it lawful for you to beat a... So anyway, and because he says that, they're taken aback and they are worried because they had already began the process. And then they asked him, basically they asked him, "How much did you buy your Roman citizenship for?" He said, "Oh no, mine's one of the ones I was born with." And so they were really, really worried. They withdrew from him, kind of set him free. But what we ended off on was the next day, they really wanted to know the real reason why all this rioting and all of this was happening around Paul. So the next day, desiring to know the real reason why he was being accused by the Jews, they unbound him and commanded the chief priests and the council to meet. And they brought Paul down to set before them. So where we ended chapter 22 was they were taking Paul before the high priests and the chief council. And that was kind of where we ended off. Now, that was a quick recap. Did anybody have anything from 22 that we didn't get to talk about last time? I think we talked about most of it pretty well. But it's fun to watch, even though Paul is going through persecution, it's fun to watch how he interacts with these people. And we talked about how he likely stopped them from flogging him for their behalf, so they would not be killed, so he could be a witness to those that were persecuting him too, because a dead person's no good to tell about Jesus. And so he stopped them in time so that they would not be put to death, most likely, for beating a Roman citizen. All right, so he's before the council. Let's pick up in chapter 23. Paul's before the council. Verse 1. And looking intently at the council, Paul said, "Brothers, I have lived my life before God in all good conscience up to this day." And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting to judge me according to the law, and yet contrary to the law you order me to be struck?" Those who stood by said, "Would you revile God's high priest?" And Paul said, "I do not know, brothers, that he was the high priest. For it is written, 'You shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people.'" Let's go ahead and pause there for a second, just 5 verses in. Paul gets to go before the high council. He gets to go before Ananias, but it's not going super smoothly yet. Would you agree with that? What happened in these first few lines of dialogue that's not super smoothly? What's the very first thing that Paul says that's taken as an insult?
I don't have any regrets, or I wouldn't do anything different.
I have a good conscience for everything I've done, right? No regrets. The riot I just caused a couple days ago, no regrets on that. And I could see how that'd be a little offensive to the council, right? So they command Paul to be slapped on the mouth for saying such a foolish thing, right? But I think it's true. Paul does not have any regrets from what he has done, but it seemed a little disrespectful. And then he says, "Because you struck me," he kind of rebuttals back, "God's going to strike you, you whitewashed wall." What does that mean? He calls Ananias the high priest that, by the way. What's a whitewashed wall? Is it an insult we use today? We probably still could.
Is it related to the whitewashed tomb that Jesus said?
Maybe. I think more in the fact of, what is a whitewashed wall? It's a painted wall. Or what's the thing your family used to say? Ugly, the mud picket fence thing. Trying to paint a mud picket fence or something like that. It's like putting fancy white paint on something that's dirty. You're just covering it up, right? That's what he's saying. You're just covering it up. And so he rebuttals pretty good. He calls him out and says, you're kind of a hypocrite, Ananias. But he does apologize because he said, "I didn't realize that he was the high priest." I didn't realize that he was the high priest because it's not for us to go against our ruling authority, right? So he's being nice, but it's not going smoothly for him yet. Not going smoothly. All right, let's pick up in verse 6. Dennis.
It's interesting to me, you got this thing going on where guys are talking about being Romans, a bunch of Jews, and I suppose some of them spoke still partly at least in their Jewish or Aramaic thing. And then we are to take it that the story that everybody's speaking in Greek, so I don't know, I'm assuming that most of what we see here took place in the Greek language and all that, but here all this big fuss just 100 words ago about them being Roman citizens. What authority did the Hebrew who's under the Roman rule in their church and stuff have to smack a Roman citizen on the mouth?
I don't know, that is interesting, right? Because you're right. 100 words ago, they were fearful for their life for hurting him, or even thinking about hurting him. But yet, I'll come to you in a second, Courtney. Yet they did strike him here. All right, Courtney.
I was going to say, well, maybe that's what he talks about when he says, "You judge me according to like God's law, but then against maybe man-made laws, you command me to be struck."
Yeah, and it was Ananias, the high priest, that did that as well. So I wonder if he has kind of, he can get away with a little more, I guess is the easy way to say that. But he does kind of call him out for it. I think Courtney's right.
But I can see it as kind of being comparable to, we can't just hit each other or something because we're citizens of the United States and Wyoming and Fremont County and all that. But I and the cop cars will just go on by, but I wondered what, if they saw one of us striking one of the other, one of the old men striking somebody else, a kid on the mouth, let alone another adult, I don't know to what degree the legal estate would get involved in that, or how much they left them alone to their own religious works.
Yeah. That is interesting. Nobody called me when I slapped Kyler in the face 3 weeks ago. Right? But I mean, we did that downtown. Somebody would probably be at least talking to me, probably the cops, right? See? So yeah, you might be right. It might be because it's in his religious space, he could get away with that, in a sense. All right, let's keep reading here in verse 6. Let's see what Paul says and how the story progresses here. Now when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the others were Pharisees, he cried out in the council, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees. It is with respect to the hope in the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial." And when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The assembly was divided. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, nor angel, nor spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge all of them. Then a great clamor arose, and some of the scribes of the Pharisees' party stood up and contended sharply. "We find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or an angel spoke to him?" And when the dissension became violent, the tribune, afraid that Paul would be torn to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him away from among them and to force them to bring him back into the barracks. The following night, the Lord stood by him and said, "Take courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome." Pause there again and just talk about the story. What's Paul? How he brings up the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and it causes division. But what's he say, and why do you think he said it? He says, "I'm a Pharisee," and it told us that the audience, at least, was 50-50 divided. It seemed like Sadducees and Pharisees. When he brings up the fact that he's a Pharisee, he's on, he gets half of the crowd on his side, basically. And the reason that it worked for him is because we see what Pharisees and Sadducees, it's actually described very well here. Pharisees believe in Jesus, angels, God. That's what they were talking about, right? They believe in these things. Sadducees are always sad, you see, right? Because they don't believe in anything. They don't believe that Jesus came. They don't believe in angels or God. They're just curmudgeons. No power from God. So Paul says, "I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees." So he's on their side. And that makes the Pharisees think, well, he also believes in Jesus and God and angels. Maybe an angel or a spirit came and talked to him, and that's the reason he's sharing all of this. Little do they know that that's just a slice of the truth, because he's literally working on behalf of God. But it causes the crowd to even become more violent. So Paul tried to get the crowd on his side, and he definitely got 50%, but instead of, getting him out of anything, it just caused them to be violent, so much so that they were worried for his safety.
I guess my thought was not that direction.
Sure.
He perceives that there's the two groups in the crowd, and if they're divided, like, Abraham Lincoln quoted the Bible, "No house divided against itself is going to stand." So if he can get them divided against themselves, he's more apt to succeed in not being killed, or maybe even being listened to, because they're all not listening, they're off balance.
True. They can't work together at all, right? Because they're divided. Yeah, that's possible. Any other thoughts on that so far, Dennis?
Has this Paul intentionally thrown a dissension between two parties of Judaism?
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the Bible calls them all Jews. It doesn't say the Pharisees is the Lord's church and the Sadducees ain't.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. they're all called Jews, and there's like at least 7 other divisions of Jews.
And they're all
Essenes
offered,
and scribes and zealots and
Yeah.
Herodians but anyway, they're all considered Jews by the Bible writers, by the Holy Spirit, i.e. through Luke. But does anybody ever use that as a proof text to think there might be appropriate times to stimulate a dissension or a division?
I don't know, I've never seen anybody try and use that as a proof text. I mean, I'm sure they could. They say, well, Paul did it.
Well, and Paul tells us 4 times, imitate me because I imitate Christ, imitate me because I imitate Christ. So
All right, well, if you want to go with Dennis, he's going to start a division after church, and we're going to, you can be Pharisees or Sadducees, and some of you can believe that God works in your life, and some of you can't. No, I'm kidding.
I'm a zealot.
But anyway, it is interesting, and I don't know if he did it. It seems like he did do it intentionally. That's kind of overstepping my bound a little bit, but I mean, he brought the Pharisees up, and he said, "I'm a Pharisee," and I think he was trying to get progress made, whether it be, a house divided or, getting half the house on his side. I think he was trying to get somewhere. But they take him away because they're afraid that they're literally going to rip him to pieces. That's how much violence has occurred here, how much the riot has taken place. But it's interesting because I don't know if it's a good place to stop or not, but verse 11 is a turning point for Paul because it shows what he's going to do for the rest of Acts, right here. I'll read it again. The following night, the Lord stood by him and said, "Take courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome." That's what we see Paul do for the rest of the book. We have 5 more chapters, and we see him shifting from Jerusalem and Jews and going to Rome. That's his new focus from here on out. So I just find that kind of interesting. It's one sentence. That's all we have that God spoke to him, or the Lord spoke to him. But that's his focus from here on out. Shifting gears. All right, let's keep reading here. Verse 12. When it was day, the Jews made a plot and bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink until they had killed Paul. There were more than 40 who made this conspiracy. Then they went to the chief priests and the elders and said, "We have strictly bound ourselves by an oath to taste no food till we have killed Paul. Now therefore you, along with the council, give notice to the tribune to bring him down to you, as though you were going to determine his case more exactly, and we are ready to kill him before he comes near." Now the son of Paul's sister heard of their ambush. So he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. Paul called one of the centurions and asked, "Take this young man to the tribune, for he has something to tell him." So he took him and brought him to the tribune, and he said, "Paul, the prisoner, called me and asked me to bring this young man to you. He has something to say to you." Verse 19, the tribune took him by the hand, and going aside with him, asked him privately, "What is it that you have to tell me?" He said, "The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as they were going to inquire about something they want to more closely examine about him. But do not be persuaded by them, for more than 40 of their men are lying in an ambush for him, having bound themselves by oath to neither eat nor drink until they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for your consent." So the tribune dismissed the young man, charging him, "Tell no one that you have informed me of these things." Stop there for just a second. Drama. Paul's always got it. I like that. Drama. We've read that Paul has been stoned to death effectively once before. I mean, they thought he was dead, so they took him out of the city, and he lived through that miraculously. We have no idea exactly how that happened. Paul always gets himself into about to die or dead situations, doesn't he? And this one's no different. He was almost ripped to shreds, so they put him back in the jail cell to keep him safe. And then the Jews, and it just says the Jews here, came to an oath that they would not eat nor drink until they killed Paul. So their whole plan is, you know what? Let's ask the council to bring Paul up so we can ask him some more examining questions. But on the way from the barrack to the stand, we'll have 40 men in the bushes who will kill him. And then we can eat and drink. Kill him. So that it's very interesting drama. I mean, this is a whole different perspective on the story that we haven't seen before. Paul's sitting over there in safety in the barracks, and we see the story of Paul's sister's son hearing this and warning the centurion, or the tribune, I guess, and telling him what the plan is from the Jews. Very interesting stuff.
Makes me wonder where the nephew was that he got to hear this.
Yeah.
You would think that'd be pretty down low stuff. Is he part of that group and not part of the 40 that just was able to hear it, or?
And we don't know anything about that, do we? Because verse 16 is, now the son of Paul's sister heard of their ambush. Heard of their ambush is very broad. Was he standing behind them at the dinner table while they were planning it, or what exactly was going on where he heard it? But he did hear it, and that was very important for continuing the story. Right?
Well, remember too, God just got through promising Paul, you ain't gonna die right now.
He did.
So, God uses people and things and positions to, for that sort of stuff. I mean, he was in the right place at the right time to hear the right information, keep Paul alive. And to me, that's God working, because he just promised him, it's not gonna be an easy road to Rome, but you're gonna live long enough to go to Rome and testify about me as well, so.
Yeah, in 22, he said, keep going and go to the Gentiles. And then here in 23, he says, you must go to Rome. So Paul knows he's going to Rome. He's going to go to Rome because God tells it to him. So you're absolutely right. God will make the way for him to go. It's not going to be easy necessarily. No promises from God on that, but he will give him the opportunity to go testify in Rome, because that's what he was told to do. He'll get out of Jerusalem.
I'm just curious. I wonder if they followed through, if they died because they didn't kill him. I wonder if they stopped eating and drinking.
They just starve themselves to death.
I mean, they made an oath.
It's a big assumption on my behalf, but knowing the Jews of this time and reading about them, I'm imagining they didn't go through with it. But that's a big assumption on my behalf. They just kind of weren't. They're a little bit hypocritical. All right. So he sends off the boy in verse 22, telling him not to tell anyone of these things, because that would, if the story went out that the tribune found out, they'd replan and probably get Paul some other way. So that couldn't go out. All right, so verse 23. Then he called 2 of the centurions and said, get ready 200 soldiers with 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen to go as far as Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night. That's like 9 p.m. Also, provide mounts for Paul to ride and bring him safely to Felix, the governor. And he wrote a letter of this effect. Claudius Lysias, to the excellency of the governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews, and when he was about to be killed by them, we came upon them and with the soldiers and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman citizen. And desiring to know the charge for which they were accusing him, I brought him down to their council. I found that he was being accused about questions of their law, but charged with nothing deserving death or imprisonment. And when it was disclosed to me that there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, ordering his accusers also to state before you what they have against him. So the soldiers, according to their instructions, took Paul and brought him by night to Antiparis. And on the next day they returned to the barracks, letting the horsemen go on with them. When they had come to Caesarea, and delivered the letter to the governor, they presented Paul also before him. On reading the letter, he asked what province he was from. And when he learned that he was from Sicilia, he said, I will give you a hearing when your accusers arrive. And he commanded him to be guarded in Herod's praetorium. All right, so that's the end of the chapter, and that's as far as we'll go, but let's talk about that a little bit. Because I think Larry's absolutely right. 23 is just continuing the story and seeing the drama just continuing with what Paul is happening. So, I mean, he's before the Jews. He tries to speak his case. They're going to rip him to shreds. They put him back in the jail cell. They're going to try and kill him. So what do? What does the Tribune do? Well, they form a plan to sneak him out of town at night. Basically, right? One of the first things we read is, let's see here. In verse 23, he called the centurions and the soldiers and the horsemen, and they were going to go as far as Caesarea at the third hour of the night. So they're going to leave at the dark of the night to try and be covered. Yes?
I have a little note.
Sure.
It sounds like the dark of the night, but it says it's 9 p.m.
It's 9 p.m., yeah. That's what mine says too. But I think they're going to leave in the dark of the night. I think that's what that's saying. You're saying it should be more like 1 in the morning?
I say until 9 p.m.
Well, in Wyoming, in the middle of winter, 9 p.m. is the dark of the night.
It's true. Got a point.
So they're going to leave. They're going to sneak him out at night so that he does not get killed as they were planning with the Jews.
Well, I wonder in 32, then, when they let the cavalry go on with him, but they come back to the barracks, if they make it back before morning. So it doesn't even look like he left. I don't know. I mean, that's just a weird statement to put in there.
Yeah, I kind of read that inferred, right? That would be an inference on our behalf. On the next day, they returned to the barracks, letting the horsemen go on with Paul. So it does look like they never left. There was never horsemen. They didn't come riding back into town at 2 p.m. with horsemen and the cavalry that took Paul away. It looked like Paul just kind of disappeared because they were there in the morning where they were supposed to be. I would say that's a pretty accurate inference.
The way I read it, I didn't give it much thought. I just thought it looked like the foot soldiers, the spearmen, they turned around and went back. And they left Paul with the cavalry to go on in, the way they were, going to the destination. And see, and then that's when you get where inferences come in.
Yeah.
So probably Paul was on one of them horses, either sitting behind somebody or else a horse of his own. Otherwise, them horses are wanting to trot along 9 miles an hour. Here's Paul running to keep up at 3.
Yeah, I presume that as well, too, because they said there was something that made me think that they had a horse for Paul.
Take all the verse numbers out of it, it's easier reading.
Absolutely.
I think it said that.
Let's see here. Also provide mounts for Paul to ride and bring him safely.
Yeah.
So, provide mounts for Paul to ride and bring him safely to Felix the governor. I mean, that's not a big deal. But yeah, they plopped him on the horse and sent him down the road quickly, right? In their time and day, that would be the quickest way to get him to the governor.
And we have a little distorted view of how far away these places are because everything's far away for us and we just think that's how it is. These guys are, that might not have been that far. I don't know.
Yeah, Craig's not here. Craig would probably know. But it probably was an all-night ride, right? So that kind of also plays into the fact that some of them went back and some of them kept going. So here's an interesting thing we haven't talked about much at all. There's the letter to Felix, to the governor. And it explains everything that we've read so far about who Paul is, and the reason that he's being sent off, and the reason that he's kind of a high-risk prisoner anyway. It also shares that he is a Roman citizen, and it doesn't seem like he's done anything wrong. Okay? Here's an interesting thing, though. He gets to Felix the governor, and they await the accusers to arrive. That's the last verse I read. In verse 35, he said, I will give you a hearing when your accusers arrive, and he commanded him to be guarded in Herod's, big word, praetorium. left the city and fled, but they're fully expecting the riot to kind of follow again. The accusers, at least some of them. So when I first read this, I thought, well, they just ran Paul out of the city to get him safely, and then they'll release him. But that's not necessarily the case. They ran him to a more secure facility, basically, is how we would think about that. They put him in a more secure place where they wouldn't kill him between the stand and the jail cell, but they could still await the accusers coming to hear him out. So he's not completely scot-free, but he's safe. He's not going to be killed. So that was just something I noticed, and I think that was probably the main intent, was his safety, not necessarily his freedom. They still want to hear what's been going on, but they want him to be safe. He is a Roman citizen, after all. All right, any other comments on that? I know this chapter's kind of, it's just kind of connecting the dots of the story, continuing the story on. Nothing huge is happening except for normal Paul stuff, which is him trying to get killed all the time. But the story just continues on, and now he is with Felix, the governor, waiting for his accusers to share. All right, any other thoughts? Yeah.
I think it's just a complete turnabout here. The end of 23, they're the commander, so it's the Roman people trying to kill him, no, but it isn't, because it's the commander. The centurion heard about that he went and the commander, so it's the military trying to kill him, isn't it?
Where are you at on verse-wise? And then I can...
I'm in 22, 26, 28, in there.
Okay.
And then one chapter later, they're protecting him. I mean, and said he's innocent. They said he's innocent. So they're going to kill an innocent guy. They don't care. They're just trying to appease the Jews.
All right.
I mean, I'm just asking.
So you're chapter 22, verse 26. I got confused there for a second.
Sorry.
Well, I think the big, huge thing that changes is in the end of 22, right? Or right about 26 even, 27. He's a Roman citizen.
Right.
And, I mean, we talked about that a lot last week. They were scared because they had already put him on the table to whip him. And they were afraid that this might even equal their death. Even though he hadn't done anything yet, hadn't touched him physically yet. So I think the table completely turned for the Roman guard, right? Because he's a Roman citizen. And then they asked him, I do think it was kind of, a test and snarky, well, how much did you buy your Roman citizenship for so we wouldn't kill you? And then when he says, no, I'm a Roman by birth, that means they are going to guard him, protect him instead of kill him. Because we talked about that last week of, it seems as if there's like levels of your citizenship.
But Felix is saying, but the letter to Felix is saying he's innocent.
Mm-hmm.
So they were going to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't even think he was guilty. That's what my takeaway is.
But that was Jews, verse 12 and 20 in chapter 23. The Jews are hatching a plot to kill him,
Right.
and the Romans are protecting him from those Jews. That's how I see it.
Mhm.
I thought that was...
And when chapter 22, when the Romans have him, it's not necessarily, we talked about that too, their justice system. It's not necessarily that they thought he was guilty or not, just the way they got information out of people was beating them. And if they didn't get information that really worked for them, they just continued to beat them until it was over. And so it's not necessarily that they really even cared who was right or who was wrong. That's how they did things, kind of rough.
And he was causing, it looked to them like he was causing these riots and people were freaking out. And it was pretty much his fault, even though he was right.
Yeah,
Chapter 22.
chapter 22 is really interesting too. They basically say, I can't find the verse right now, they basically say, you're not that Egyptian guy that's been causing riots in our city for weeks?
Yeah, with the group of assassins.
Was the group of assassins? We thought we got that guy. So that guy's still going to cause a riot. So they also kind of realized we got the wrong guy. And so, but you're right. The Roman guard basically is now fully in the camp of he's innocent, even though they were trying to maybe beat him to death a couple days ago.
That indicates, that many soldiers to take him, I don't care if it's a 5-minute ride, I see it as a few hours.
Mhm.
That's tremendous government expense expense
Mm-hmm.
to see that one guy gets his legal justice chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that even more solidifies them in this camp of they think he's innocent, right? Because the guard who would kill somebody to death just to get information about him really cares that this guy doesn't get killed by the mob. Seems like, yeah, this guy is special, and we're going to transport him and keep him safe. You're absolutely right. All right, we will pick up in chapter 24 next week. And we only have 4 more chapters after 24 in Acts. So we'll be done in a full month or so. And then I don't know where we're going to go in Bible class. So if you have suggestions, let me know. But it is really cool to see the beginning of the church and then here lately in Acts follow Paul closely. Follow Paul and see where he's going. And he's going to Rome. That's where he's going now. All right. We'll be dismissed and we'll be back for sermon and singing here in a minute.